you just saw Asteroid City, right? How was
I
that?
did. Yeah. Fantastic. Another one of those stunningly visual movies. There's a little bit of typical Wes Anderson oddity to it, which is
Of
something that
course.
I enjoy. But there's such a, so we're always, if you think about this, and you do, I know, because you were Mr. Designer Extraordinaire back in your day.
Yeah, those were the days, the good old
Exactly.
days.
There's always something, in my own personal opinion, there's always something very architectural about his style, because every frame is deliberate. Every frame is curated to, this is exactly what I want to see. And they're so artistic. I mean, there's just something extremely beautiful about his movies.
Yeah, yeah.
And the good thing is that, so I saw it when we went back to DC. I had to go into town for a client meeting. We had the opportunity to go see the movie, and we went to see the movie at the AFI Silver Spring, which is the East Coast, part of the AFI Film Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the East Coast one, but it is also an old Art Deco, absolutely cool, beautiful theater. It was funny, as some time ago, we went and watched a movie there that was It's a Wonderful Life. And we went to go see it. And before they started the movie, the guy came out and he was like talking about the history of the movie. But he was also saying that this was one of the first movies that the theater had played. And it's just fun to know that the original was showing originally. We're sitting in the same theater several decades later, and we're sitting in that movie theater watching that movie. But it's always kind of fun because it's just got it. I would say that this movie and the interior of this movie theater has got a very Wes Anderson vibe, because it's kind of a Grand Budapest type kind of grandeur to the theater.
Okay.
And so it's fun to watch movies there. I mean, it really is, because it's a movie palace. It's back in the day. It's a movie palace. And there's the reverence of the experience. And that's what I love about going to like old theaters like that, is like today you got like, it's almost like the Velcro as you're walking across the sticky floor and everything else.
Yes.
And the seats are uncomfortable, or now they've got the recliners and stuff. But there's
Lazy boys for everyone.
There's just something about these old theaters with the velour cushioned seats and stuff that just harken movie palace.
You got to say harken when you think about
Exactly. See,
when you're thinking back that far.
I gotta use.
You have a soft spot for all that really old stuff.
I've got so we're always asked this question, and for some reason somebody asked me this question just the other day, and I don't really know why. I mean, say, well, if you weren't an architect, what would you be? I'm like, I'm 53 years old. If I'm not an architect, I should be retired. Yeah. I mean, like,
I'd be retired.
I feel like well, I mean, in old architecture standards, we're just coming into our career, right? This is just when we get started.
You're an emerging professional.
Exactly. But, I always give kind of like smart cake, oh, I'd still be in the Army, or I'd still be doing this, or I'd be doing that. And to be quite honest with you, I think I know what I would love to do. And it would be owner and operator of a movie theater.
Oh, I see.
I always have this, what if I won the lottery? And of course, I think somebody in California just won the $1 billion Powerball or whatever it was. And honestly, my answer never changes anytime somebody even says, hey, what if you won the lottery? I'm like, well, first I got to play. But if I did, I would design and build and operate my own movie theater.
Oh, you wouldn't buy like an old timey? It sounds
like I would design and build an old timey one, but with modern technology, modern conveniences, everything. It would be basically a resto mod. It would definitely be somewhat of a resto mod type thing. But no, I honestly think, and I don't even recall why they asked me that. It's just like, was I giving off some vibe that I wasn't happy? I mean, in fact, actually, it was in a meeting where I was actually having a good time because I got to step away from the one project that I'd been working on for the past, in the design phase only, for the past 2.5 years. And there gets to a point when you're somewhat beleaguered on that one, and you
The
sort of
glacial pace of
the
architecture.
glacial
Welcome.
pace of architecture.
Oh
Yes.
my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow.
yeah. And
So
so,
someone just asked you, even though you weren't like totally
no,
giving off the vibes
no,
that
I
you were
hope I wasn't
extremely
giving off the
unhappy.
vibe. I was actually having fun because it was a, you'll love this. It was a revisiting of the project that I was just on before this current project.
Okay.
And during construction, because this is usually when you bring in the end user, is during construction, to say, hey, I know that you just built all of this stuff, but now we have a user group, and what we
We
just
need to
built
change
doesn't
everything.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
What we just built doesn't fit. So
How did I
let's
see that coming?
start all over again. Yeah, exactly.
Looks good. Start over.
Yeah. Well, it was expected, to be quite honest with you. And so people are like, "Oh, I can't believe we're doing this." I'm like, "Wait, it was something that we were really expecting, because it was just something, is like, at the time, COVID, no one was really looking to move, or people were doing their own thing within their own like lab spaces and stuff, and not really looking towards the future of a new space. And so a lot of the interface that we would have normally had at the appropriate time, or like, let's just say early time, not appropriate time, but earlier phases, got bypassed because of COVID. And so, it's just one of those victims of some crazy times. So crazy times beget crazy times.
There was a line item in the budget for that, right? Like
In
crazy
fact, it was
times, the
exactly
reckoning. We call, we'll reconcile the crazy times at some later point. We're going to save some money for that.
crazy times, 20%.
Yeah.
You know, like
At
20% of
least
overall construction
20%.
budget.
Right.
Yeah,
Whatever you think it's going to be, triple it.
exactly.
Because that's what it's.
And to be quite honest with you, now that the new, I hate saying the new normal, but the new normal of
Oh yeah.
the
Don't say that.
extremely high rates for like the long lead times, the escalation in cost, and all of that other stuff. I mean, those line items are actually growing. We had somebody who had, I say have the nerve, well, let's just say they had the nerve to say, why is our building, we just did a reassessment of the building and it's costing so much more. Why? And it's like, okay, first of all,
You're like, have you seen groceries?
has
Like what?
has anybody been paying attention? Gas prices
Right.
inflate. Like if you start with just gas prices and you go from
my
there,
goodness.
I mean, gas prices are going to affect the delivery prices, going to affect the manufacturing prices, are going to affect, and then you just rattle on all of these things. And then they're like, yeah, well, why is our building going to be 30% more or 20%
Wasn't that a
more?
fixed fee? It was a GMP. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's just like,
Right.
it's like, you
Well,
remember that,
it is funny.
go
You
ahead.
look back. I'm thinking back to like all these old meetings, and and there was always the escalation line item, right?
Yeah.
And it was always some huge number, and you're like, really? And now you're talking about it, and it's like, yeah, really, like that's a
Right.
real thing. So did they plan for escalation in this project enough? Are you saying they didn't?
No, they didn't. I mean, because it was just one of those things that they just assumed that cost was going to stay the same, I guess. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because like what's escalation normally planned at? Like 10%, maybe 10 or 15%?
Yeah. And we have been looking at 30, 35%,
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah.
Dang.
It is definitely something that people aren't prepared for. And the conversation that we've been having is, oh, your budget isn't aligned. The original budget that we had for this project isn't aligned. And so now you're X amount over. Well, that first one was pre craziness of the market.
Yeah.
And so there should have always been a reassessment or a realignment of the budget.
Yeah. Right.
And there wasn't. And this
Wow.
is, this is profession wide. I mean, this is a conversation that we're having with everyone, with every architect is having with everyone. I've seen a couple of tweets from a friend of the show who she has been, posting things about like, if projects get completed and things like that, or even if they get started. And a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that at the beginning of the process, you do a cost assessment of the project and you get one number. And especially if a project like stretches out for as long as a lot of these projects, like, I was just saying, design process that I've been working on for the past 2.5 years, we haven't even gone out to bid yet. So, I mean,
Things would be different.
is the budget on this project from when it gets out onto the streets and when it gets into the hands of contractors, is it going to be the same as what it was 2.5 years ago? No, absolutely not. Should people be prepared for that? Yes, absolutely. Are they? Rarely.
So that reconciliation that happens throughout the phase of the project, where are you at with this one that you're talking about? Which phase are you in?
We are, seeing how it's following the RIBA standards, not the AIA type standards, but what they call detailed design is what we call construction documents. We finished those. We're preparing our bid set to go out what is called issue for tender. And so we're in the IFT phase of things. And so issuing for tender is going out to bid. And so in fact, actually the beginning of next week, it will be going out to bid. And that's when the proverbial ish hits the fan, because it will definitely be one that they're like, oh. And so the question will be asked is like, how do we reconcile the cost differential? There's really going to be only one conversation that'll be had. I mean, because, when you go through these cost reconciliations and it's the value engineering, and value, of course, I'm using the big air quotes there because rarely is there any value brought to these. It's really, truly a cost reconciliation. And so you bring a hatchet rather than a scalpel to the party.
And the scalpels just don't work either, right?
No,
no. Be honest, you can't just make a million cuts.
No.
It never adds up enough to typically what needs to actually happen, which is like an arm of the building needs to come off. That's why.
Oh my gosh. So we were asked for a few value engineering suggestions in anticipation of the bids coming in probably at a little higher than what the current budget is. And without sacrificing any of the program for these buildings, which it's going to be really hard, to be quite honest with you, there's, they say, well, what can we do? And so we were offering up a few things, and everyone there, absolutely not. I mean, we can't do that. This has already been approved, and it's gone all the way to the board, and the board has already approved.
By everyone, who do you mean? On the owner side?
Yeah. In this particular one, there's one owner, there's one end person that you basically can't say, oh yeah, by the way, you can't get what you want, because it's not going to
says that to the person.
No one says that to this person.
Well, so the other option is you have to pay more, right? I mean, that will be a follow-up for us, is when I tell you what the result of all of this will be. Because yes, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're unwilling to say back off on finishes, or say back off on certain bits of program, or we've got a couple of like more folly type pieces in here that aren't necessarily part of the actual, they led to the architecture or the overall feeling of the architecture and of the place. It is intended to be mimicking 300-year-old Najdi Saudi Arabian architecture. So, there are some things on there that aren't necessarily occupiable space, but they are part of that kind of overall concept that is required for this development. And so for us to say, well, yeah, we could take these off. Well, again, if the guy who has reviewed and approved all of this and is expecting a certain thing, he wants that certain thing, and he gets that certain thing, where do we go? Like what, there isn't anything to sacrifice. And so, you're almost like, you're not really trying hard to give us these value engineering suggestions. You've offered this and this and this, and they just aren't going to cut it. And you're like, well, I mean, what can you do? I mean, if we are in the proverbial rock in a hard place, what can you do?
Well, if you're talking 30% more than the original budget, that is just an enormous number.
Oh,
like that
it
is. And I've been through value engineering before, and it is a million cuts. It's a million tiny cuts. And you are on the hook to make those changes on your own dime, typically, not all the time, but typically, if you're the ones providing the cost estimates. And then even if the markets do change a little bit, like we said earlier, you do have those contingencies for escalation, and you've got various contingencies in there, and those contingencies get used up usually. And then you're still over. And then, I mean, I've been through it, and I'm sure we've even talked about it on the show, where it's like 1 week, it's like we have to cut $2 million. And the next week, guess what? We still have to cut $2 million. And like, well, we did. And it's like, yeah, well, we found more stuff.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating going through the design, bid, build process and being on that side of the table at the end, where all you can do is keep cutting stuff back and cutting it back. And then that changes the details, and it changes. You have to do a new cost estimating all the time. You're always providing quantities and square footages and surface areas of all these various materials. And man, it's just a terrible process to go through. I cannot imagine 30% overage. I will say, not because of just what you designed into the project, but because of all of these other uncontrollable factors that are going on in the world, and saying like, no, we're actually only going to spend the money that we budgeted for, when all of these other costs have gone up. Never mind, the architect's fees haven't gotten to go up at all of that.
No, never.
I mean, it makes you absolutely crazy.
Oh yeah. I will say, to a little pat on our back here, is that we actually are not at that 30%. We are actually, I think, just a little over 10%. But 10% in their opinion is too much. And to be quite honest with you, I think we're at like 13, to be quite honest with you. But when you hear the number is,
you're like Han Solo. You can round down, or you can round up. You pick which way you want to round.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
13 is closer to 10 than it is to 17. I don't.
Well, to 20. It's closer to 10 than 20. So we'll go there. How about we'll just say 15%? Damn it. But what's interesting about that, though, is that, you look at the market, and we're actually below average for the overall escalation, which I think we've done a really good job over the course.
That's what your lawyers get to say. Well, according, standard of care, and me, like,
oh, well,
like, look at everyone else.
Honestly, we've actually brought that up in these conversations too, because every single project. Now, I'll say that there are several Starchitects that have buildings around us. Do you think that they are on budget? No.
It's not a good statistic, though. I think the number is like 70% of building projects are over budget. So that's a huge number.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a huge number. And I think it's because there are a lot of unknowns in these projects, for sure. No doubt about it. And there is scope creep, for sure, all the time. Oftentimes that's driven by the owner, the client themselves. Always the architecture side. And so the reconciling is a really tough thing, because everybody wants it to be the cheapest it can be. And at the same time, that's not always the right answer.
Right.
And you're designing a building for how long in the future is that building going to be around for? And you're trying to get the most value for your dollar at the same time, but people are very, very much interested in the first costs, not the operational costs over the long haul.
Right.
They might not even be there after the next 5 years because they're in some administrative position and they're career hopping anyway. So they're trying to look
Yeah.
good now by saving everybody the money, and they get that letter of recommendation, and then they're out and going to work
Look
somewhere else.
it's like,
It
look what
happens all
I've
the time.
done.
Yeah,
I
look what
brought
I
this.
did.
I brought this
Yep.
project in under budget and under time.
It becomes
And
a
see you
bullet
later.
point on your LinkedIn profile, like here's a challenge that I had. Here's how I overcame it, and yep, that really
Yeah.
happened. But also, you were the a-hole in the process.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that's the world where I'm living in right now, is either in an area where we're redoing something that's already built, or squabbling over the cost of something that has yet to be built.
Yeah, nobody wants to give up. Like usually with these multi-headed clients, where you've got, if it's we've both worked on school projects before. There's like an administration, and then there's a user group, and then there's these other faculty groups, and there's like the students, and there's all these, and it's like, well, we have to get rid of some space on this project, and nobody wants to give up any space, because how often does a building get built on a campus? Not that for that specific piece of program, like for these new labs.
Right.
We've never had new labs. We're going to get new labs, but you don't get a new lab. Who wants to be on the receiving end of that? Nobody. So nobody's willing to give up their space. And so now it's like, well, now we just have to look at the whole thing and say, what if we took out all the ceilings? What if we swapped out the floor material for that? What if, and then like, okay, now let's switch the conversation over to judging architecture after it's done. And nobody saw that process happen, and they just say, man, this building sucks because of this, this, and this. I can't believe those architects did it like that.
And so funny enough that you say that. So I've changed the way that I look at other buildings now. So I look at things still pretty critically. I mean, we all do. But I used to always say, man, that sucks, or why would they have done that? And now through the course of
those circumstances,
several decades of those circumstances has put me in a position. It's just like, I bet they wanted to do this, but somebody vetoed them, or they value engineered something, or they did this, or they did that.
Yes.
And because I'll be walking around, and I'm sure you do as well, but I'll be walking around with people, and they'll look at me, oh, you're an architect. Hey, why would they have done this? And you almost say they probably did something differently, but because of all of those forces that you were talking about, something had to go. And every time we do these value engineering exercises for this cost reconciliation, and not real value, we're not, not bringing in that real value. We're just bringing in this kind of like, okay, how do we make it cheaper? Do we spend time looking at structural systems? Do we spend time looking at mechanical systems? No, we always look at the low-hanging fruit of the architecture, of the fenestration and things like that. It's like, oh, you've got too many windows. Why don't we cut all those windows out? Or, hey, those are some really fancy doors. Maybe we get some cheaper doors instead of the fancy doors. Or, and it's always this or. And so when you like, oh, that could have been, you look at something, you're like, oh, that could have been so much better. It was. At one point in time, it was. And then the budget came in, or the bids came in, and they're like, yeah, we still want to build this. We don't want to lop anything off. So, because I remember going through this exercise, K through 12, I was doing a high school, and this was at a turbulent time in the construction industry. And they had asked us, okay, we've got to cut. It was a $45 million renovation. It is a huge school. Renovation, complete facade redo, a systemic upgrades to all of the mechanical systems. There were, new finishes throughout the building. Well, they come back and they say, we've got to cut $24 million. Go. What are they cutting?
Is that off the original budget, or is that the overage?
No, that wasn't the overage. That was off the original budget.
Oh,
They,
see, yeah, but we still want
because
all of it.
they still want all of it. They still
Yeah.
want it the way that they'd approved it,
Yeah,
but now they want it for half price.
right.
This isn't a bazaar. This isn't a market where you can haggle with them. It's like, okay, so you see those Conair windows? You said that they cost $100,000 a square foot. Can you get them for $50 a square foot? Like that's not the way it works, right?
That's not how it works. Yeah.
But that's the way people think. Is like, oh, come on, you can get that Kohler faucet for half that price, right? Can't you haggle them down? It's like, yes, that's how it works in this world.
People do think that. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a job where it wasn't anything that I was on myself, but it was another team in the office, and it was for this natatorium project, and they had this job walk, and all the architects went out and nodding and looking around, and yes, yep, looks like we're going to put a natatorium here. And then went after the project, went after the RFP, competed against other firms, won the project, and then it was like, okay, here's the program, here's the budget, and there was a serious error in the budget by it was like an outside feasibility study firm had done this. They had put the program together. They're the ones who created all those documents that everybody had to go by, and then someone in our office realized like there was a huge error in it. And it was the same thing. They took it to the client and they said, yeah, but you said we could still have this whole building. And it's like,
Yeah.
but the consultants that you hired made a big error, and there's no way to do it for that price. There's absolutely no, but we had already been hired to do it. We had beat everybody else. And now it was like that reconciliation process is just torment to go through.
Or you have, good example is current existence, where you have a set program. And so you have a set program with a set budget and, of course, scope creep. And we're not talking about like a scope creep. We're talking about like 20%. Yet that 20% increase in the scope still needs to be carried under that old budget without any like reassessment of the budget because, oh, we wanted this, we want this, we want this, we want this. Okay, we gave you all of this stuff. Hey, now why is it coming in over budget? Maybe because you asked for 20% more buildings?
Yeah. No, the clients never want to look in the mirror at that.
No.
They don't. They want to they want to blame it on somebody else.
And then they're like, okay, well, so how do we get it back to, we'll go back to this cost reconciliation. It's like, how do we get it back to that? Well, we cut 20% of the building off. Oh, well, we can't do that. Well, then,
yeah.
Guess what you got to do?
Great subject. That's great.
Yeah. I don't even know if this is what I actually intended to talk about. But
these are the realities of working in the profession on real projects, getting real things built. These are the challenges that
I'm going to tell you, I'm nervous about it going out to bid and seeing what the numbers come back as. Because
you don't want to see those numbers. You know what they're going to be. And
we've already done our own we've done our own internal BOQ, bill of quantities, and we've had other people on the client side do a BOQ as well, and we've matched things up and somewhat close in the numbers, and the numbers still aren't looking favorable towards the overall budget. But if you look at it versus what it's going to probably be in an ever-changing, ever-escalating market,
even then, there's going to be contingencies. Like they're not going to guarantee the price because the prices are all over the place.
Right. Exactly.
Jeez.
Exactly.
Jeez.
And so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see.
It is amazing that anything gets built ever.
Going back to that comment, it's just like it really. The tweet that I saw earlier's comment is that it's really amazing that anything gets built because of
all of the other factors that no one ever really thinks about. If we just think about just the architecture, just the way it looks and how it goes together and all of these other things, that's just like, that's a small part of the overall influence
the
of
easy
anything.
part.
Exactly. Honestly, that is. I mean, like designing and detailing out the building really is the easy part. Designing and detailing out a building that meets all of these different criteria, whether it's LEED or Amsterdam or all of these other like sustainability practices that we have to go after, and whether or not it fits the budget, whether or not it fits, this, that, or the other kind of constraints. And I was thinking about the other project that I was telling you about, and there was 5 different committees that had a say in its design, its operation, its program, and all of that other stuff. 5
Wonderful.
different committees. And it's just like how, and do they ever, do you ever get anybody in the same room together to say, hey, I want this. Oh yeah, well, but I want this. Okay. Who wants it more, or who wants this one because they're opposing and all this other
right.
stuff. And then the question was always asked, it's like, okay, we literally have, and I asked this, I was like, we have 5 different people that we have to answer to. We have had 5 different directions. They are all contradictory to each other. Which one do we listen to? Which one takes precedence? And then when you get the answer, all of them do.
Right.
Where do you go?
I'm the decider. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all the decider. Yeah.
It's just like,
where do
well, you
go?
can't ignore their comments. Okay. Well, you can't ignore their comments, but their comments are completely diametrically opposed to these comments. And so if we did this, that this person wants, then this person can't get what they want because it literally is occupied in the same space and it's completely different within that space. Yeah. We had an argument over, well, not argument, but, we had a debate, discussion, design direction from 5 different people over the lobby. And 5 different people wanted a very, very different type of lobby. One was a very active space that potentially had cafes and all of this other stuff in there. Other people wanted something more passive that was strictly for the user group of that, no public entrance or anything like that. There was all these different things. And where this building addition and renovation was a key new entrance on a side of this overall campus that, I guess I can say what it is. It was a medical research lab building for Hopkins Hospital that Hopkins University or School of Medicine is going to be using, not will be, is going to be using. And that side of the hospital has never had a public entrance. And this is the new public entrance for that side, but it's not a public entrance so every hospital had their idea, the School of Medicine had their idea, the Board of Trustees for the hospital had their idea, but the Board of Trustees for the university had their idea. And then the major donor had their idea. And yes, so and none of those ideas matched. None of those ideas were even
get them all in the same room at the same time and
that is not how it worked. Shame that you would even suggest something that logical.
Yeah, how dare I suggest something that might actually get someone to the bottom? Like no matter how long it takes. Like we don't leave this meeting until we have these issues settled. But it's so political. It gets so politicized through the process. Well, these people don't like those people, and these ones are equals. And so if they have diametrically opposed ideas, how do we can't settle it. And
right.
So you're the architect. You have to figure it out.
Right. You just said something that when I was in the office last week, somebody was saying something and I said, well, that's architecture. It's politics. And it really is. I mean, there is more politics than people would really want to admit to in architecture.
Yeah.
And
well, corporations, there are politics involved, or, and by corporations, I mean any kind of entity it could be a university, it could be a hospital, whatever. like there are politics involved, and so and then we have our own office politics,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
But when you're the architect, and when it's a single family residence for a family, there's politics there too, and a lot of times it turns into counseling, right, from the architect to work out these issues and try to make decisions, because our goal is to make decisions and get those documented so that the thing can get built. And if people can't actually decide something,
Yeah.
it just becomes this unending loop, and it's of frustration.
So speaking of politics, I can't say too much just because it's not I'm probably going to say more than I need to, and
Well,
I'm
you
get
can
black
edit the
bagged,
show, and yeah.
and I'm going to get black bagged in something. But we had a project, or we had a project that we are working with a client on that I guess I could at least say this much is like had a representative of our company accompany them to Capitol Hill. I was that representative. I have no idea why anybody would have thought, hey, let's have the sarcastic one go head to the Hill. But sure enough,
It has to do with experience. Yeah.
I really hope that I can, as things develop in the future, I can talk a little bit more about it. It is an amazing project, and to be able to sit in a chairman of a committee of the House of Representatives, the U.S. House of Representatives, and pitch them the idea, be there as support for the client to basically be their backstop if there's any questions that are asked that are specific around the planning and the design of this particular type of project that is really intended to be a project for a lot of different uses and be development for all sorts of things. And I'm being cagey for a reason, because I don't want to hear any helicopters and be drug off into this thing. But what's really interesting about it is just it was this really interesting opportunity. And so I got to at least tell you this part. So we had like 30 minutes with the committee chair. And so we get like right on the second of, we were supposed to go in at 1:30. Right on the second, we were called in, and we went in, did our shaking of the hands and everything, introducing ourselves. We all kind of like sat down. We had a couch and a couple of chairs, and we just like sat around the coffee table and just sat there and chatted with them, and it gave them the lowdown of exactly who we are, why we're sitting in front of him, and what the project is, and what the vision of this project is. So, but as we're going in, we hear bells going off. They had moved up a vote on the House floor. And so all of the chairman and like all of his staffers were sitting around, and they were like looking at their watches and their clocks. And where I was sitting, I was looking behind his shoulder, and behind his shoulder was a flat screen TV, which had C-SPAN on it, and they were showing the live vote going on,
live feed, right?
And it had a counter on it of saying how long you had to, like, how long the vote would be open. And so, of course, we didn't get our 30 minutes. We got 13. We basically had to take an entire 30-minute presentation and question and answer and compress it down to 10 minutes, because we were in there for an official 13 minutes, but good part, at least a minute and a half was, shaking hands and, introducing ourselves. The last minute and a half was us shaking hands and thanking him for his time. And so we had 10 minutes, which I will say I was thoroughly impressed at how like he was very focused, very attentive, listening to it, engaged, knew exactly like a lot of the different legislation that would, have to be a part of this project moving forward, asked some amazing questions, We got to engage a little bit with kind of it, but again, everything was like very compressed. But it was really interesting to like say that we were in there, we were going in for 30. We only got 10, but that 10 was it was the most condensed, but most concise and very thorough 10 minutes in my architectural career,
That's how the
because
whole government works, Cormac. It works that well.
I will say that the interesting thing about it was, is we went in for a specific ask. We ultimately summarized everything with that ask, and a decision was made to at least move forward with, like developing legislation and things like that, which was really, really interesting to see how quickly. And no, clearly we know that it doesn't work that fast and it doesn't work that concise.
It's a well-oiled machine.
But it was just really interesting to just kind of like see it. And so, here we are, and then the guy bolts out, and he's literally got 6 minutes to get. So we're in whichever, like the Cannon House office building, which is across the street from the U.S. Capitol building, and he had to get from the Cannon office building to the floor of the Capitol building to do his vote. He had 6 minutes. Now,
It's
granted,
like a passing period. Yeah.
well, the good thing is that he took the elevator down to the tunnels and took the tunnel straight across, and the tunnel leads you basically straight to the House floor. And so he made it in time. He had 6
He had time
minutes
to stop at his locker. He had time to use the bathroom.
He
had
was-
to get from English to math on the other side of the street.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And make sure that, he brought his trapper keeper with him.
Right. So this brings something interesting. This is something that I just came across today. There was an essay that somebody I follow on Twitter published, and I haven't read it yet. But one of the things that I was reading through the thread that was posted. This was on Twitter, not Threads. So
So you mean tweet?
Somebody wrote a thread, and
Right.
it was interesting to see how one of the people summarized the essay with ChatGPT into bullet points, right? So it was like the Cliff's Notes version, and it was very easy to read, easy to understand, and they just said, this is just straight out of ChatGPT. I didn't go through and edit any of this, but it was a very long essay that took a very long time to write. He said it took 7 months for him to write this essay, obviously not working on it full time or anything, but it was just
research.
it was about like how to structure your life and what to pursue. And so it's kind of these big overarching ideas, and ChatGPT did a pretty good job of summarizing it. And so then he came back and he said, wow, this is really interesting because I haven't really thought of this before, and your project ties into this, which is compression, the idea of compression. Mm-hmm. I wonder how well my ideas compress, and meaning, so how long is the original? How long is the summary? How do the ideas come across well? How much repetition? And because this is all about architectural drawings, right? We don't ever just say it once in the right place. We kind of say stuff all over the place, and we do all these extra things, and we have these extra views and these extra vignettes and these extra renderings and these extra drawings and all this stuff. And so you think about compression. And so you had this presentation figured out, and then you were forced to squeeze it down and say the important stuff. And I wonder if we should, well, I kind of think the answer is yes. We should be looking at our stuff like this more often. Like, well, what is the minimum viable product? What is the minimum viable presentation? And using tools like this, because we go through such painstaking process to create these presentations, to prepare for the presentation, to give the presentation, who's going to say what, when, what goes with this slide, what's on the slide, what does that lead us to, what are the possible questions they could ask when we're done with this during the Q&A, and we kind of, role play all that stuff out.
Right.
I wonder if tools like this can actually help us do that, and if people are using it to do that, like I saw happen in this tweet thread.
Well, it would be really interesting because the long version of the presentation, I had 24 slides.
the short version, I had one slide, and I didn't even get to talk about that slide. Now that slide was also the cover. It was more detailed, and you should have seen like all of the notes that I had on my one slide. So like, when we got to it, I had like all these like little bullet points and like all of this like little, it looked like
everything.
It looked like this weird little string theory diagram of like all sorts of things in all sorts of different directions.
String theory or serial killer. Speaking of architects who are serial killers.
Wow. Yeah.
Article this week.
Exactly. I'm not even going to get into that one, but,
right. Yeah. Fine.
But no, it's just what's interesting about that in a very kind of not so funny haha way is how so many architects are like, yeah, I could see that, just like, oh my Lord, are we that bad? Are we that bitter of people?
It turns out.
Be like,
yeah.
But now I don't even know where I was going with this, the string theory of things.
Well, you said you had one slide and you had all this stuff on it.
But to your point is just like, when we realized that we were going to really just have to be compressed about this, and we had already made the decision before we went in there, when we still thought we had the 30 minutes, that it was really only going to be like one slide for me, one slide for someone else, and one slide for someone else. And then there was like a few slides, and then there was kind of like a preamble of like who we are, why are we there kind of thing. And then the rest was opening it up for questions and of a grilling about what was next, what was to come next. And so, but it was interesting. It's interesting you say that, because everybody's just like, oh, well, you just had one slide. I mean, how long did that take? Well, I'll tell you how long that one slide took me. 3 weeks. That's how long that one slide, everything that I did that was on the 24 slides, which were just basically kind of an expansion of that one slide, all of that stuff was still put on that one slide. Every bit of my multiple meetings per week with the client, going over and talking about things, and all of the different developments of all of the different types of things that we were putting on here. And I'm trying to like make sure I'm not saying anything specific, but everything about what I was doing, there was a lot of work. There was a lot of work from a lot of people that went into these slides that then got condensed to one slide that then basically got condensed to just a few words. When we go in there, that it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in episode 300 when we were with the guys, and we were talking about, kind of like the value of architecture. I mean, we always go in there with so much stuff to prove to them that we've been doing something, right?
Right.
Rather than the fact, exactly,
right.
We always say, oh, well, somebody actually had criticized, why do architects do this? Why did they go in with like 3, 4, 5 different concepts, and they go and they pitch all of these things, but they're really only going in there to pitch one concept, but they're showing all of these other ones. It's like, well, we tried this, and then we tried this, and we tried this. But what all of this taught us was that we really felt like this was the right one. And so here, let us talk about this one. And they were like, why did architects do that? Why did they spend so much time showing everybody? And it's because nobody sees the process that it took us to get to that one was so much more than just that one. There was so many different iterations. The joke that I made of like all the different babies of all the different ideas on the floor. We always have to we somehow, some way have got it built into our system that we have to prove to them that when they say, well, did you think about this? Yes, we did. See, I already showed you this. Or yes, we did. I showed you this, kind of thing. It's like,
yeah, right.
And I've always questioned that too. It's just like, why don't we go in there with what we can carry a big old pile of other things that we have done that we may not ever show them unless they say, well, have you thought about that? It's like, oh yeah, well, we kind of looked at it this, and here's this one that we had talked about, but as you can kind of see here, this led us to this, then led us to this, then led us to what we're showing you. And they're like, oh, okay. But we're always having to say, it's like, look at us, we've been working kind of thing. And it's just like, why do we do that? So it goes back
I'm sure
to,
there's I'm sure
Well, I
there's
mean,
a good story out there from some old architect who walks in with a giant pile of trace,
yeah,
but only shows one drawing.
yeah.
Right. It's like, this is what we've been through. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this. This is the one thing.
Well, yeah. And that's the thing, is that goes back to your trying to make things a little bit more concise, a little bit like, how do we distill it down to the idea and present the idea instead of presenting the idea, but then all of the trail that led to the idea. It's like, oh, and on the way, we saw this bird in the tree and it was tweeting at me and I tweeted back at it. It was just like, nobody needs, like, it's like if you've ever been down south and they give you directions and they're like, oh, you go down the road and it's about 2 miles down, you're going to see this house. And you're like, okay, well, what do I do at this house? Oh, no, don't worry. Just keep on going past this house. Like, why are you telling me about the house? I don't need to know about the house. I need to know, where do I need to turn? Is it 3 miles down the road? Oh, no. Well, 3 miles down the road, you'll see this general store. You'll see this truck parked out there. And you go over some train tracks and then you'll do this and you do that. And you do this. And then you'll see this kind of like fork in the road and you go to the left. Like, why didn't you just say, drive down the road until you see the fork in the road and then go left? Boom, you were done. That was it.
Sure, Cormac, I'm pretty sure that you just described how an architectural drawing set works.
That's that's the point. That's how architects go into their presentation, go into their documents that they prepare for construction. All of this stuff is literally the southern directions for how to find Evan's house.
How to get to the house.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Start at the floor plan, go to the section, go to the wall section, go to the call out, go to the detail, go to the specification. Yeah, and it's like, oh, here it is. Here's that information. It only took me 18 steps to get here.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So you bring up a good point, because we were actually going through an effort to kind of reorganize some documents. And they're just like, oh, well, we're used to seeing it this way, you're used to seeing it that way. And you look at it and you're like, well, that's a really convoluted way to get to like the information that you're trying to present. And so that's kind of like whatever. But so when I was kind of solo, not kind of solo, when I was solo and I was doing documents on my own, I set up my documents by absolutely no standard known to humankind. I set them up to a standard of what I felt like was a logic way to get from point A to point B as quickly and concisely as possible by providing documents that led you to the solution as quick as possible. And I
want an example.
I would love to show these. I would love to. Well, it was the E.O. Wilson Biophilia Center. I had a set of documents from Sam Mockbee, and this set of documents was so beautifully drawn, but it was so simple to literally get from point A to point B. And I patterned a lot of it after that. In fact, it was kind of the inspiration for the design of the project. It was somewhat of an homage. He had just recently passed, and I'm not going to get into it, but it was just something that as I was working through it and coming to a design solution, I was doing a lot of looking back at a lot of his projects and kind of like the regionalism that he was working on. And so I came to a solution that was somewhat of an homage to him, but I realized that my documents were as well, because it was such a simple process to illustrate the overall project in as few of sheets as possible that still gave you all of the information that you needed for full documentation in a logical order of getting you from point A to point B without all of these like trip ups of like, and look for the dog on the porch, and well, what do I do with the dog on the porch?
Oh man.
And because I remember looking at a set of prints that I had made for this firm that I was working for in Montgomery, Alabama. And this was one of the largest churches in downtown Montgomery. And I looked at the set, and the set was 8 drawings long. And it was this big building, multiple buildings on the thing, and it was 8 sheets. That was it. And I look at it, and I looked at how they arranged it, how they did their sections, and how they did their head sill and jam details, and all of these different details. And you look at them, and the way that they stacked it, it was like origami that, it's just like you just unfolded. And it's like, oh, well, when you fold it back in, boom, building. When you unfold it, here is like the process to get from point A to point B, because then boom, now you have your building. It's like, why is I'm looking at the set of documents that I just compiled from the submission?
Right.
Go ahead and guess how many.
I think you've told me before. It was like, wasn't it over 1,000 sheets?
Well, just the architecture.
That was all
So,
of them.
well, that was all. So just the architectural set, 511 sheets. 511 sheets.
And it's like 8 buildings?
It's 8 buildings.
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, you're like, oh, well, 8 buildings over 500 sheets, that's not really that bad. And it's like, well, there are a lot of like duplicate details and things like that. But there's just like this intricacies of like how things going to. Yeah.
You need
gosh.
even if they are the same details, no, they're not people aren't working on the same building at the same time.
Oh my
They're
gosh,
in one place
yes.
at one time.
Exactly. Yeah. But when you put the whole thing together, it's actually, it's thousands of sheets, like, or
right.
1,500
with
or
all
some
the disciplines and everything.
Yeah. And it is insane. And then you think about it, it's like, how did we get away with doing buildings with 8 sheets?
Yeah. Right.
It's because the architect was out on the site.
There was that. It goes back to that idea of compression. And I mean, it even reminds me of
Exactly.
some of the first case studies projects that I ever did with Craig Elwood House. And it was like, it's actually the final design is all of the things that have been removed from the project. It's not, and doing something simple is incredibly difficult because we always barf a bunch of stuff out onto the page in the beginning. There's a lot of ideas. Things are not going to last forever. They say this, you throw the spaghetti on the wall and you see what sticks, right? Like this is the process, but the process of removal and refinement and getting down to the least amount of whatever it is to make the building, to make the documents it's incredibly hard. It's hard. It's difficult to edit it down to that point. So I get why it doesn't happen, but
I truly was the project editor. I mean, it was just like, okay, we cut everything. Like we cut every section, every elevation, every this, every that, everything was represented. And then you go back and you're like, okay, what do we need? What do we really need? And then we taper it back.
Because sections are free now and elevations are free now. And so renderings are free now. And so there's so many additional things that you can put in there, but what can you actually not put in there? And that to me is a question worth asking, because this idea of if I could write a 70-page book, or I could give you a 7-page book that gets exactly the same point across, which one would you pick? You would pick the 7-page one all day long because you've got a lot of stuff to do. And so to me, I'm actually interested if these tools can help us do that, because we can't do that. We absolutely suck at it.